Okay. How many of you came to the Vietnam commemoration? Tom Gills was one of our presenters there and had a very short time, so he's back today and we are so honored to have him here. He was a U.S. Navy combat aviator in Vietnam from 67 to 68 and 69. He flew the Navy A-4F Skyhawk. It's a single-seat, single-engine light aircraft built by McDonnell Douglas Aircraft. He flew off of the USS Tycon, thank you, and the USS Oriskany during 2 combat tours in Vietnam. Very serious business. He flew combat missions in North Vietnam and South Vietnam, attacking assigned targets in North Vietnam in Route Package 6 and flying close air support for U.S. combat troops in South Vietnam. He had 332 combat missions. That's rough. Carrier aviation, he had 412 carrier landings. He had 112 night carrier landings. He was awarded 23 strike flight air medals for aerial combat flying, and he was decorated 8 times. He grew up in Camas County, Idaho, graduated from University of Wyoming in 1965. He received his Navy wings in February of 67, left the Navy in 71, and operated a cattle ranch near Mountain Home, Idaho. He's married to his wife, Joy, for 55 years. They have 2 children and 6 grandchildren, and he currently lives in Mountain Home, Idaho. So it is my honor to introduce Tom Gill.
Boy, it's really nice to see you guys here. I thought there might be 5 or 6, so appreciate you coming out. It's a tough day. Anyway, Barry wanted me to tell the story quickly as I get started, how I got into aviation. A buddy of mine, Hal Barron, this is Camas County, 1957. We wandered down to the little dirt strip there south of town, and he said, my dad has an airplane out here. And it was a Taylorcraft. I didn't know it at the time, didn't know any difference in any of it. Never been in an airplane. Anyway, he said, let's go sit in it. So we went and sat in it. And he says, you know, I can start this. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, so he reached up over the visor, took the key down, and pretty soon he had it started. And he says, let's taxi around out here. So we went out and taxied around. It was really fun. He showed me how to use the rudders to taxi and the little throttle, you know, and it was just thrilling, you know. And he says, I can fly this, you know. Now we had wrecked my dad's car the year before, and we tore everything off the underside of his dad's big Buick going around the corner there at Corral. So neither one of us trusted the other one very much, and I didn't believe this at all. And I said, baloney. And he said, no, I can't. I really can. And so I said, well, show me. And so we put it out there, and sure enough, he could fly that thing, and we took off. And it never dawned on me that this is the first time. It just occurred to me that, you know, but when the ground fell away, you know, something happened in my heart, and I think every aviator has that moment. But we flew around all over Camas Prairie. The Rice sisters were out at Hill City. We went out there and zoomed their house 2 or 3 times, and then there was a little grass strip beyond there, just over in Elmore County, and we went out and landed there, and the girls came out in their car, and he asked them if they wanted to fly, and they said no thanks, and I didn't want them to either, because I wanted us to get going again and get back in the air. We headed back towards Fairfield, and he says, do you want to go back now? And I said, well, how long can we fly? And he said, I got a lot of time. We flew out to Magic Reservoir out in Blaine County. And come out over the reservoir, he said, you know, there's a little restaurant down there. We'll go down there and have a Coke. And it had cross runways there. And we didn't know anything about crosswinds or anything like that. As we come down, he kept sliding off. The runway was there, and we're over here. And I said, you got to be over here. And he says, I know what I'm doing. Ultimately, we put that thing down. We pranged it into the ground, collapsed the right main, broke the right wing off, ground looped the thing around and went through a barbed wire fence. Come to a stop in a cloud of dust. And then about that time I realized I've got to call my dad and tell him what happened. My dad was a Marine at Peleliu in Okinawa in World War II. Tough little guy and very strict. But that's how I started. That was my first flight. And my second flight was out of Laramie down to Denver to fly up to Sandpoint Naval Air Station at Seattle for my flight physical. I passed that and went into naval aviation. Okay. Anyway, everything starts in naval aviation at Pensacola, Florida. And I don't have a picture of Pensacola, but that is a wonderful spot down there, and still a lot of memories. And that's where the Naval Aviation Museum is there. And the Blue Angels still call that home base too. But this, what I wanted to do today was kind of go over. A lot of guys don't know, if you haven't been on a carrier or around carrier aviation, you don't even know how we do it. One of the important things is all of the, let me get on here a little bit farther. This is the Oriskany. My second cruise was on the Oriskany. This, the deck is fully loaded now, and they've got everything ready to, they'll take these birds. I got to find my pointer here. They'll take these birds here and pull them back in there, push everything all the way to the back, and then they'll begin the launch cycle off the forward cats. You've got a starboard cat and a port cat, and that's all they have on these small decks. These are Essex class boats. They came out of World War II, late World War II manufacture, and then after World War II and in that Korean time, that's when they put the angled deck on them. They learned how from the British and put that angled deck on so they could fly the jets. And Sue mentioned the F-9. That was very prominent in the Korean War. In fact, VA-192, my squadron, the Golden Dragons, they picked up their nickname, world famous Golden Dragons, because they flew in that movie, Bridges of Tokari, which was F-9s. Those were straight wing F-9s. When I went to the Trading Command in Vance Jets, that's what we flew there, was the AF-9, which is a single seat model of that, and it's a swept wing then by that time. Made by Grumman, we call it the Lead Sled. An amazing airplane. I mean, was a perfect airplane for young would-be naval aviators because you couldn't hurt the thing. You might hurt yourself a little bit, but that thing was just amazing. I'll tell you a couple of stories here, but anyway, I'll get going here. Here's a carrier high-speed turn. I just stuck that in there because it's fun to see that, and that is they're just barely started in that cruise. And the carriers now, the modern carriers, you can't stand up on that deck when they go into a combat turn. It's just amazing how they can turn those things. Back in my day, you could get up 32 to 35 knots in a carrier. Today, they can get well above that. These big decks now. This is the Intrepid. The only thing I had this on here for, I wanted to show you. You land, the ship makes the Fox Corpin. That's the course that the ship takes into the wind. They turn into the wind for launches and recoveries, and then they steam depending on how much wind there is. If there's 10 knots, they steam along at 15. Sometimes they have to make their own wind, and they'll cruise along at 24, 25 knots. This is the Plain Guard destroyer. It's back there at about 1,000 yards in trail. They stay just off the wake in case some people fall off or something. They'll be able to spot them easily. The aircraft, when you come in, you come across here at about 600 feet, and you make the turn downwind, and you go abeam the ship, which a beam is just a regular racetrack pattern around it, and then you come back in and make your approach back here and come in and land. You'll pick the mirror up off maybe almost 30 to 40 degrees off of the mirror. You'll pick it up and begin to see your approach from that point, and that's the curved lens, the Fresnel lens. There's about a 15, 18 second interval between landings if they're running everything right. You'll trap, you'll pick up the cable, you'll run out. When the pilot traps, you're coming in with the flaps down, speed brakes out, and your power is up around, I'm sorry, I'm hitting this thing wrong, but your power is up around 94, 95%, so that when you trap, if there's a hook skip, then you're going to 100% instantly when you touch down. Speed brakes in, then you can get back off the deck again. So that's why they run it that way. But if you trap, you'd end up in this area where this airplane is, and that airplane is just sitting there for what reason I don't know. Then they've got one more here on the starboard cat. This is the forward elevator. There's an elevator just part of this, the extension of the angled deck there, and then there's an elevator back here on the small decks. The big decks have 4 elevators. When you land, when an airplane lands, it goes to 100% power, speed brakes in, the arrestment, it throws you forward in the harness. The airplane kind of tilts and wobbles and comes to a stop. A guy with a hook stick runs out from across the safety line here. He runs out in case the cable hangs up on the hook. He'll knock the cable off the hook. The arresting gear motors back down below here, there's one on each side. As soon as you run out ends, the arresting gear motors will pull the airplane back a little and then stop, and the cable usually just drops right off the hook at that point. When he comes out with the stick, there's a first class landing, first class that runs out in front of the airplane, and he gives you the signal that get your hook up, and everything's good. Gives you a right brake signal and waves you around, and you'll taxi across this line. All of that has to be done in that 15 to 18 seconds because you have to be across the safety line here. And you'll taxi right over in front of the island. This is a superstructure called the island. And then they'll bring you up here. If you were the first airplane, they'd taxi you along this side and park you right here. And this is where all the refueling is done on both sides, right here. And then the remainder planes, like an Alpha Strike, you'll have 40 or 50 airplanes in an Alpha Strike. So the remainder planes are parked in here for refueling. On the deck, and you'll see in one of the pictures, there's a little star-shaped plate that's in the deck. It's about 8 inches in diameter, and there's one of those about every 20 feet on the deck, all across the deck, so they can tie anything down quickly where it needs to be. There's a lot of deck motion and heavy seas, so they want everything tied down. Let me get on here. This is a Constellation, just finished the recovery, and you can see how they're lined up here. And they're refueling them, and then they'll take everything back here onto the back of the boat, and that's where they'll load the ordnance. This is the Ticonderoga underway refueling. Everything is done, nothing stops. They just shoot a line across, either from here or from the big deck itself. They shoot a small line across with a shotgun type. Maybe there's even somebody here that's done that, I don't know, but I don't know all the details about that, but the line gets bigger, and pretty soon they've got a cable across there, and pretty soon they're hauling these big 6 and 8 inch fuel lines across. The decks in those days were all black oil carriers. They would take on fuel every few hours. They had to take on fuel in stores. So there's either an oiler along beside us or a storage ship quite often. And you can see how he's down at the bow here. This thing fully loaded weighs almost as much as a carrier. I mean, these things are real slugs in the water, but they're out there day and night out there. This is the Coral Sea refueling a destroyer because they don't refuel the plane guard destroyers. There's one in trail. He's just setting up. He'll come up into this area here. This one pulls off ahead and makes a big circle out here and goes around and gets them back again. This guy, by that time, this fellow's coming up, and he refuels. So the refueling takes place even during ops sometimes, your day and night ops, and the refueling takes place. And the reason they do that is the carrier's got a lot much storage space than the destroyers. This is the Constellation. I just had this picture in here to show you they're beginning to take the aircraft back. This is not a picture of a combat. They haven't got enough airplanes on here for combat, but this is what they're out there in care quals or something like that, and they've got them refueled and they're taking them back, and then they'll start launching them here. The big decks have waste cats. There's 2 waste cats here. The little decks don't have that. Okay, and here's what it looks like in a combat situation. This is the Hancock, and they've just got a little bit more refueling, then they're taxiing those back, and they'll get them stacked up back in here. And the pilots are down in their ready rooms on the second deck. There's an escalator that comes right up and opens up just under the deck boss right here. And you go out, walk out, and man your aircraft. Everybody mans up. And when you man the aircraft, then you check in with Pryfly, the air boss. He's up here. His windows run all the way around, so he can see everything all the way around the boat. And you check in with the air boss, and just you give your side number, 204, up and ready, boss, and they check you off on a little plastic screen there.
Tell us what the aircraft are.
Say again.
Tell us the aircraft that were on that carrier. Can you do that?
Okay, well, let me go a little farther here. You'll see some more. This is, I like this picture. This is what it's like when you're in rough seas. The Sea of Japan, always notoriously bad. Some of the China Sea is this way too. But this is a helicopter. The pre-launch helicopter is tied down there, and you can see you've got water coming over the bow there. Here's, again, they've got a radar airplane. This is called a Stoof with a roof. It's an S2 propeller-driven airplane, and it does search and rescue. It does radar searches. So I don't know all of the things that they do with it, but we used it in Vietnam. They would take it up into the northern Tonkin Gulf and then give you readouts of radar from the coastal installations, the radar that Haiphong was using. This is just a shot showing you what the number 2 elevator looks like. That's the portion that is in the front part of the angled deck there, just showing you. And this is a static display, probably the midway down at San Diego. And then I'll get on into, now that we'll get into operational. These are 2 A4s on the Cats. You can see the launch crew is out here. The yellow shirts are plane directors on the deck. They do all the plane directing. They handle all the airplanes. They're the only ones that give the pilots directions as to where they should taxi or when they should taxi. The brown shirts here are fueling, plane captains, that type of thing. Green shirts are ordnance, red shirts are ordnance, a different type of ordnance. Purple shirts are fuelers, and there's some white shirts out there, but everybody's got a vest type, so everybody knows who you listen to and who you don't listen to. So here we are, just pre-launch. They've just got the helicopter wound up, and it'll lift off, and then they'll begin to taxi things forward and shoot them off the deck. On a typical strike, you would leave the deck off of one cat or the other. Your companion in your section, whether you're the lead or the guy flying the wing, you'd be both on the cat at the same time, and then you join up off the bow, climbing out. The leader just makes a port turn, sets up a port turn at 250 or 300 knots, and the wingman just joins up on the wing line. Pretty quick. You can get it done in about a quarter to a half of a circle. And then if it's like an alpha strike, different elements of the strike are at different altitudes, 14,000, 15,000, 16, 18, 20,000. Everybody gets joined up, but they stay at there with about 1,000 feet separation. And then when they proceed into the target, they join up even further. You're preceded, most of the time we were preceded by Shrike. There'd be 2 or 4 plane Shrike, depending on the size of the, they'd go in and try to suppress the radar sites. If they could get one of them to come up, then they could shoot down at, and I'll show you a radar site here a little bit later. This is a midway, and I wanted to get as many decks in here as I could, but one thing I forgot to mention, the LSO platform is right here. And that's a landing signal officer, and there's each squadron has an LSO, and then there's an air wing LSO who's kind of the boss LSO. He's the one with the most experience. And they're there on each approach, and I'll go over approach a little bit later here so you kind of get the idea what the sound of it is like. Okay, here's an A4 going up to the Cats. This is some of my pictures. You can see the guys are manning. If they've called the boss and told them that they're up and ready, they usually close their canopy. It's a little less noisy, and it's a lot of heat, and you can turn on the air conditioning with the canopy closed. Here he's not quite ready. His brown shirt's they're checking something. I don't know what it is. And one of the first A4s, he's got bombs on, so the Shrike and walleye guys are gone. So this is one of the bombers. He's just taxiing up to the starboard cat here. This is just a shot of, shows an F8 going off the waste cat, which is over here, and shows an A4 set up with a jet blast deflector. The way the airplanes are configured for the launch depends on the size of the holdback that goes in. And the holdback goes, it's like a dumbbell, like a little dumbbell. One end of it slips into a notch on the aircraft receiver, and the other receiver is on a cable on the deck, and they fit that in there, and then they just tension it down. That'll hold the aircraft at 100% power at that given weight. And then when the stroke goes, with the catapult stroke, it breaks that, it just snaps that the barbell handle, if you will. It breaks that apart, and the aircraft is launched. The forward part of and I'll show you some more pictures of this. Here you can see an F8 just gone off the starboard cat, and this is setting up with this is the A3, old Sky Warrior, which was a kind of a relic from the nuclear days, but the Navy used it as a refueling airplane. It carried a lot of fuel, and it was just amazingly efficient to be able to come off the beach with a hole in your wing or something and run up there and plug in and get back to the boat. So that was a lifesaver many times over. And then you've got another F8 right here just coming up, and you can see the JBDs are just going down here, and then he'll taxi across those. And here's an F8 again going off the port cat, and this one's just ready to go. And this will be MIG cap or bar cap. They'll go up and take a station somewhere in the northern Tonkin Gulf and get into a racetrack pattern and wait just in case the North Vietnamese launched anything. In my day, 67, 68, we didn't see any MiGs at all until we went across the beach. Later on in the 70s, they got very aggressive, so they were busy all the time. Here's an A4. What I wanted to show here was, and you'll see it again in another place, there's a cable runs right back here to the wing root, and another one out the other way, and it comes down and it goes around, I don't know how to describe it really, but there's a shuttle on the deck, and the shuttle is what's connected to the steam cat. It just runs right down the track, and that cable, that big, heavy, I don't know, maybe a 2-inch cable, it's looped over the nose of that turtle. We called it the turtle. It's technically called the shuttle, but it looks like a turtle. It just looks like a turtle shell out there. And you actually taxi in the A4, you just bounce the nose wheel up over it, and then they'd give you the whole signal and they'd attach it. Here's the airplane, and now you can see the cable running down here, and then there's another one you can see running up on the other side of the fuel tank there. The catapult officer, he's in charge of everything. Once the airplanes get on the cat, he's in charge of everything. He stands between the cats, and he's the shooter. There's men on the side. You can't see them. They're out of the picture here. The newer decks, the cat officer is in a little bubble here in the middle of the deck. They can actually raise it and lower it, take it down under weather conditions, things like that. But in our day, the cat officer was always out on the deck. And what he does, once the bombs are loaded, everything's done, the airplane is there, there's a bunch of last-minute checks. He gives the pilot the signal, the run-up signal. The pilot goes to 100% power, checks his instruments, makes sure everything looks all right to him, and then he leads out and salutes the cat officer. And sometimes the salutes are not like you would think a salute was. The cat officer then, he continues to run up, and then he's looking, he uses the other hand while this hand's going, keeping you running. He's looking down and checking with everybody and sometimes checking back. He wants to see that everything's good and you're ready for launch. When it is, then he will kneel down and touch the deck right here like this. When he touches the deck, they fire the airplane. So he returns your salute, whatever it is, whether it's the one-finger salute or whatever, And depending on how well you know the CAT officer, and we're all in it together, we're all aviators. Everybody operating the flight deck is an aviator, the officer types. And the most important people on the flight deck, and I would say this, and I know every aviator that ever flew off a carrier would agree with me, are the yellow shirts. Most of them are, there's some chiefs out there, of course, keeping things under control and looking for those little minuscule things that somebody else has missed. But the first class petty officers in the Navy are a bunch of gung-ho, amazing people. They know they're going to make it a career, and they keep everybody under them going. And a flight deck is a very busy, dangerous place, so they're really on their toes out there. But that's how the airplane is fired. Now the F-8, you can see, has got a different hold down back here, and the cables are actually behind the nose gears up here, and the cable running back to the shuttle is back here. So every airplane's a little different. Here's an A4 that's just cleared, and you can see the shuttle cables have come off right here. Here's the shuttle at the end of the stroke, and then the cable is dropped away from the airplane. The A4 had a little, always had a little settle off the bow. You kind of almost go into rudder shaker there momentarily, and then comes out of the hole, as we call it. Every airplane's a little different. This is route package 6. This is the most dangerous part of Vietnam. The Air Force operated primarily in this area, and the Navy operated in the Bravo area, or Haiphong, that area. But on big alpha strikes, we went either place. As you come down through Vietnam, here's the DMZ here. The route package 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 6 was evenly divided. The war took place in all of those areas, and we fought a lot of the war down here. Here's Khe Sanh down here, almost into Laos. And it has. There was did anybody go and see the movie that showed at the Egyptian about a year ago about?
Bravo.
Yes, the name of the movie is Bravo. If you ever get a chance to see that, do. That's about the guys that were the Marines that were pinned down at Khe Sanh. And we flew in there repeatedly in early '68. Okay, here's just a picture that I've always liked. This is the old Navy Sky Raider A1D, the SPAD. They flew that. VA-55 was the last Navy squadron to fly it in Vietnam, and they flew it down south. But it carried a lot of ordnance, had a lot of loiter time. There's a lot of guys that Marines that have wonderful memories of having that SPAD over the top of them. And then it's just to give you the relative size, it's not exact, but the A4 is on the other side. It's on the port wing of this. And you can see he's tipped back. The SPAD is tipped forward, going as fast as he can go, and the A4 is kind of cocked up there. This is an air refueling. This is called a buddy store. It's got a probe with about a 50-foot refueling line. And all the planes, here's the probe, here's a refueling probe on the A4. The F-8 comes out off the side, just off the pilot's left knee. And then you just drive the probe up into that basket and push it a little ahead, and then the fuel transfers automatically. Hundreds and hundreds of airplanes were saved by coming back off of the coast of North Vietnam, or even South Vietnam sometimes, where they could get to an airplane and refuel, take them back to the carrier and get them aboard. This is an F4. I just wanted to show ripple salvo, what the conventional ordnance, that's how it comes off. They can, if there are men in here that were ordnance men, they know the triple ejection racks and the multiple ejection racks, how they functioned, how they could set the timers on them and drop the bombs off and the bombs could all go at once. They could ripple salvo off like they are here, so that the first one's hit, the next one's the next one, So this is an A4 dropping retarded snake eyes. You can see where they've just come off. This one is not clean. There's a little band that holds those fins up against the bomb. These are 500-pound bombs. And then you can see here there's a little explosive charge that pops it off of there, and they fully extend. And those bombs, once they come off, then they just drop right straight down. So they're a wonderful low angle delivery ordnance. Here's some more in a ripple salvo with the snakes. And this is just a demonstration picture that I picked up, but it shows, you can imagine how effective they can be. This is an A4 firing Zuni rockets. The Zuni pod is right here under the wing. It carries 4. They're about a 5-inch rocket, 4.5 or 5-inch rocket, about 4.5 or 5 feet long. They're a lot of fun to fire. You get, they're very accurate. They've got enough high explosive in them that they do a lot of damage. Bob Wood and I got into, we had just come back from Hong Kong, the first hop after Hong Kong, and we found some WIBLCs, waterborne logistics craft. The Navy acronym for that is WIBLCs. We found them just in the coast south of Haiphong, just along a riverbank there, and they'd taken big bats of grasses and laid them out over it during the daytime. And we were on a road recce. We hadn't found anything really that would be of great use to or effectiveness to hit it. And we were armed only with Zunis. That's all we had. And so we had 2 pods under each wing. And we made a turn out there, and there was just a glint under the bank there that shouldn't have been there. It shouldn't have been that way. And so I said to Bob, I said, "Did you see that?" He said, "Yeah." And we're flying what's called a combat cruise, so he's off 100, 150 yards, and you're covering each other 6 o'clock. We made another turn back around there, and sure enough, there was something under there. And then I made a pass just down the river at about 1,800 feet, and they shot at me a couple of times. You could see them shooting. So then we went back and attacked them along that bank. And those barges, there was 7 barges there. They were carrying Willie Peter white phosphorus, and they were taking that south to use in building some bombs down there. But we set those things off. It was absolutely spectacular. I mean, you just can't. It's one of those times when you just want to get closer and closer and closer. You want to watch your Zuni go right into the guy's waist belt buckle, you know. This is a bombing run, just showing a bomb coming off. I had that in my file, and I'm not sure why I even thought that it was. Sometimes when you're taking pictures, you shouldn't be taking pictures, and the pictures you get aren't very effective sometimes, and this is one of them. But it does show what it looks like in about a 35-degree dive angle. This is the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and they came down out of the north and worked their way through Laos, and then they came back in just north of the A Shaw Valley in that Khe Sanh area. So it was a very intense, hostile environment all through there. They don't come in just one place. And mainly when they get into the south, they're pushing bicycles with 80 to 100 pounds of gear, whether it's ordnance or something on it, and they're pushing those bikes along these trails. And you can see how intensively it had bombed. This is a POL storage area here, which we really obliterated. But in the POL, the petroleum oil lubricants, and they would bring those in 50 and 25-gallon barrels, and they'd strap those on the bikes and bring them down the trail. And at night, you'd get in here and see. In the daytime, you didn't see so much. You're really just trying to interdict the road so that they couldn't use it, which was almost futile because they could patch a road up in no time at all. I don't know where they found the warm bodies and shovels, but boy, they could patch a road up and go around it. They'd cut the trees and go around it. And with a bicycle, they didn't have to have hardly anything, any kind of trail. This is when the Viet Cong got into the south. The reason I included this picture was the Ville is here. This is the village, and that's where you'd expect to find that type of concentrated activity, where they would have weapons, ordnance, maybe light artillery or something stuck in the ground somewhere like that. But the forward air controller, was flying an OV-10, and he had found these guys, and he spotted them just the way they were acting when they ran away as he came over. And then he watched where they went. He went off flew off quite a ways away and watched where they went, and then he flew back over there and picked up some fire. They started shooting at him, and that's when he called some Marines in and us in, and this is just the beginning. That's Gus Eggert, my skipper. Those were his bombs in there first, and I'm just right behind him here in this airplane, and it was amazing how much. And when we were done, we had bombed all of this in here, us and the Marines, and it had turned it into this kind of look, where all the vegetation's gone. It almost made us feel like we made a B-52 raid on them. The B-52s, when you see what they can do, that's one of the most amazing things. TPQ drop in the south along the DMZ, the B-52s, they would put them in a line, and they would be 10 or 12 of them. And when they were done, there was nothing left. There were not even trees standing. It was just an amazing display of firepower. This is a pea oil storage area, which you can see very hard to find, very hard to identify. There may well have been some here, and some here. But the Mistifac had identified these. These are down in Route Package 1, and he had identified these and knew what was there. And we went in and hit that and did a real good job. This is Kep Airfield, which is north of Haiphong. In 67, 68, the few times that we were up there in 69, they never launched. What they would do is they'd take off, they'd go out to the west, get up to 20,000. As the strike group was coming in, they'd lower their nose and they'd just fire their air-to-air missiles and dive for the deck. And sometimes by the time, that was when we were coming across the beach, so another 50 miles, we'd be headed for down in this area for Haiphong, or headed farther upriver for Hanoi, and these guys would be in their landing pattern. But this was actually a strike on the Kep Airfield, just to kind of pin their ears back. This is what an SA-2 site. We didn't, in my time there, we didn't see any SA-3s. They were all SA-2s. They were proximity fused for 28,000. They would explode at 28,000 feet if they didn't. The proximity fusing was 100 feet. So we had quite a bit of separation on them. The way we flew them, and I think, as far as I know, probably to this day, that's the way they fly. When you see it come off, in wet weather, you don't see it. You have to actually see the flame, or somebody calls it off the ground. In the dry time like this, you'll actually see the dust cloud of it coming off, and then it just looks like a telephone pole coming up at you, and it's curving toward you or away from you, and you just turn into it and then pull out and put a lot of G, and when you turn into it, you're moving back this way, it starts tracking you back that way, and it's accelerating all the time, and then you turn out of it and pull up a little bit, put a little G on the airplane, so you're slowing your airplane down and moving sharply away from its track, and it can't. The SA-2s, and I think the SA-3s too, the newer stuff probably is even better, but they couldn't track, and they would just go by us, over your head or behind you or something like that. But this is the way they were set up then. And this is the tracking unit here. This is all the electronic stuff. There's a subunit here, which I don't know what that was all about, but you can see. Or I'm sorry, this is the radar unit. This is this unit. Then there's one here. There's one there. There was one there. Another one there. Usually they had 12. They kept about a dozen at each site, and so they were strung out quite a ways. But what happened, they had to have service roads, so that was easy to see. Once you figured out what was there, it was pretty easy to find them, because they had to have those service roads to get to them, and you could spot them. On a strike, the strike shooters, way we would go in was ahead of the strike group, and there'd be two to the south of the strike group and two to the north, and then you would just go in and try to get them to come up and track you. And when they did, when their radar went hot just before they launch, you would pick that up off your equipment, your ECM gear, and then you could put your missile right into, and what you were shooting for was the radar unit itself. And they might or might not launch a missile or two, or even they would just salvo the whole bunch sometimes just to have them in the air. This is an F-8 this is a guy named Curtis, this fellow here, and he got out of it safely. He's right here. You can see the rail that the I'm just over here. I took a bunch of other pictures. We thought we were going to get farther out over the water, but we're well out over the water. The northern SAR is they've already launched a helicopter, and they're back here. We're up at about 15,000 feet here, and he flamed out was the reason that he decided to get out. Once the nose fell through, then pretty much stall condition. But he got it slowed down prior. You can see the speed brake hanging out here. The gear came out on its own. He didn't pop the gear out. But at that point, his name's Switzer, Bill Switzer. He said, well, I'm getting out of this thing. So he jumped out, and then the northern SAR, the helo from the northern SAR, which sat off of Haiphong, out probably 25 miles out, and they had a rescue helicopter there and a rescue swimmers on it, and they were right there. They had him out of the water in about 10 minutes. So very, very nice recovery. This is the squadron colors for VA 192, the Golden Dragons. This is Mike Astosian. This is John Nichols of VF 191 in here. This is since there never were any pictures of it, but this is the day that Mike got the Medal of Honor. A week prior to this, he had done the same thing, shooting strikes at a radar site, and had been very effective, and they'd written him up for a Silver Star on that. And then he went back on this mission and took a AAA. They think maybe an 85 millimeter exploded right in this area, and there's more damage. You can see the engine's chugging and on fire there. But it shut the engine down. He was trying to get it back out over the water, but then he quit communicating with, and you can read it, you can find the write-up on it, but John Nichols tried to communicate with him several times, and privately John has said that he was slumped well forward in the cockpit. He was pretty sure that Mike was gone at that point. And finally, he followed it down to Mike followed it down to 1,500 feet, John Nichols did. And the plane just fell off on one wing and went into the ground. But he was written up, and he's the only Vietnam Medal of Honor winner in the Navy. A great aviator. Now we're back to the recovery cycle. This is the LSO platform, and everything's launched up the deck from the LSO platform. Here's the ramp area here. There's a lot of things going on. They're getting ready they've pulled all the airplanes forward, getting ready for their recovery. So there's a lot of hustle going on up the deck. The LSOs, I'm sure this is the LSO, the air wing LSO, because he doesn't get his hands on anything. He's the big shot. You can see one of the squadron LSOs here. They're getting and they calibrate after each launch. They recalibrate everything on the cats, and on the recovery, they recalibrate everything before the recovery for the cables and so on. The cables are about 1.5 inches thick, and they've got a big loop built right into the cable. Interesting thing about an arrestment cable, the core of it is hemp, so they can squirt oil into that and keep that cable well oiled. And they do that constantly. They oil those cables. They're just black grease on them. But they run the width of the deck, and then there's, I can't remember the name of the cable that it hooks onto, and it runs through the stanchion and down into the arresting gear engines themselves. But the purchase cable, there's a carrier guy back there. Okay, here's what it looks like. And I will, when you come into the carrier, your approach in here, whether you're 2-plane or 4-plane, you fly right just along here, and you make your brake turn out here. And the reason you do that is Pry-Fly, the air boss, they want to be able to see everything. If you've had trouble, they're going to look it over. If you have real trouble, they'll even have you come by slow and fly along this side and let them look at the airplane and see. I had hung bombs a couple of times, so one on the left wing that they went ahead and recovered me, and it didn't come loose. And another time I had hung bombs on the right, and Bill Taylor was on my wing, and he said it's hung up on the after bracket, so the bomb was just hanging down like this, and they wouldn't let me recover. And then you go into Chulai, the Marine base at Chulai, and they recover you there. And as I got closer to Chulai, they biggered me from the carrier, and as I got closer to Chulai, the tower controller there kept saying, you got to expedite, come in as quick as you can. And I just didn't understand that. And I thought, well, I'm coming as quick as I can. And then when I got on the long straight-in approach, he said, you've got to expedite. He said, fly the approach as fast as you can. He said, how fast do you fly the approach? And I said, about 150 knots. But I said, I'm touching down with a bomb at 150, and on your runway there, you sure you want me to touch it down that way? And he said, as fast as you can. So I touched down, got on the brakes. This little pickup come racing out from about the second or third taxiway there. The follow me truck, he raced out in front of me, and he dodged right back off again because I was still going too fast. He caught me at the end then, raced up alongside me, waving, both guys in the pickup waving at me, and I couldn't figure out what all the trouble was. They texted me, and he just drove right through the revetment. A Marine plane captain jumped up on the side of the airplane. He says, get out of the airplane right now, shut it down and get out. And I said, well, I'm not going to. He said, no, don't do anything, just get out. And so they took me into a tent along the side there. There were sappers in the ammo dump, and within probably 7 minutes, that ammo dump went off, and it was amazing. The ground shook for 2 hours, and it was just a 4th of July kind of a thing. Big, heavy stuff going off. And the whole time we're in the tent there, and the Marines are having coffee and playing cards, and stuff is coming down on the tent, and I thought, boy, I'm glad I'm on a carrier out here. Anyway, once you come in, make your break. It's about a 10 to 11 second break, and the airplanes go out. The pattern altitude drops from 600 here down to 450. Some conditions, if you've got a low scud layer, they'll drop you down to 300. And then you fly downwind. When you get a beam, you call the tower. What they want to know is your fuel weight. They already know what the airplane weighs, and they know that you're clean. They want to know the amount of fuel you're carrying in pounds. So your fuel is always given in pounds. So you would call, this is 205, a beam, fuel 1200, gear down and locked, speed brakes out, flaps down. And they just come back and roger you, and then they would set the arrested gear motors up, and they can do that with just in minutes. I mean, very quickly they have all that done, maybe seconds. And then you fly the pattern on around, and you'll start your turn just as soon as you've made that call and they've rogered you. You can see the mirror here. These green lights are datum lights. They're just there for reference to find out where when the yellow ball here, it's a source light back here. The new mirrors are very different. It's all self-contained. But the old mirrors, there was a source light that shined into that recurved mirror, and then it shines back up the glide slope, and it comes back up, and you fly that. And you fly the approach at about 92 to 94%. Speed brakes out, flaps down. You've got the airplane trimmed up to an absolute angle of attack, and then you fly the glide slope with power. You control your rate of descent and your rate of climb in the glide slope with power. And then on the approach, the other thing you have to do is the ship is going this way, and the angle deck is going this way. So there's a continual little right wing down correction to maintain the center line. And you'll even see one guy makes a correction. I've got a picture of one guy here in a minute. That's his correction. His last wing down correction was about 8 feet off the deck. So when you get good at it, you just fly it. It's like driving a car. You just fly it in there and land it. There are 4 cables across the deck. The one that nobody wants to be, you might trap with a one wire, but the LSO is going to chew you out. Your skipper is going to bring you down and talk to you because you're too low. You don't want to fly. You don't want to have a ramp strike. You don't want to have the hook catch the ramp. and you don't want to fly into the spud locker down here. Now this is 2.5 seconds out. Once you're in the groove, and this is the groove, the straight in. Once you're in the groove, it's very, very quick. And you can see the LSO platform over here. They've already trapped some airplanes along here. Here's the center line at night, and you'll see a picture here in a minute. This, we call it the skag light. It just hangs down there, a series of lights that hang down, and it gives you relative bearing on the center line. So the airplane would land, catch the hook, or catch the cable, run out to this area. They would pull you back a little bit. They would knock the cable off if they needed to with the bat, and then taxi you across here and taxi up into the refueling areas up here. I'm going to show you a picture here in a little bit. In bad weather, one of the troubles you have is taxiing up into this area. The only thing on the edge of the deck all along there is a scupper drain, and it's just a raised pipe barrier. I don't know, maybe 6 inches high. And there have been more than one occasion where the carrier deck is tilted hard in rough seas, and the airplane is right there, and the plane director is directing you. He's taking you over to the side and making you make the turn so that your tail is out over the edge of the deck. But in that process, you have to get that nose gear pretty close. And the deck shifts and the airplane slides on a wet deck and the nose gear bounces over. And I'll show you a picture of when that happens. And this is just about down here. And you can see the ball, nice, very nice pass. The airplanes are stacked up. Here's the superstructure. The bombs are, the ready bombs are on bomb carts back in here. This is the cherry picker if the airplane fouls the deck, or if they get an airplane that's shot up real bad. They wouldn't do it during the launch, but they'd just take all the black boxes out and hook the cherry picker on it and drop it over the side. And that happened once each cruise we dropped. And it's a big ceremony to aviators. You stand there with your hand over your heart and tell the airplane goodbye. What am I doing here, Barney? I'm not getting anywhere. Barry, could you go to the next one?
Better wave off.
This is a long approach. Anyway, we were care calling on the Ranger off of San Clemente, and I talked about an airplane going over the side. There was a Lieutenant Brown in VA-23, and the terrible seas there. This was wintertime conditions, and we were trying to get our night care quals in. And we'd bingo into Miramar and come back out with half a tank of fuel and try to get another pass. You had to get your 12 days and your 6 nights in before they'd take you back out. And anyway, it was kind of routine. You just get it done, and you were done in an hour. And it took us 3 days there for about 7 of us. And I come in and got waved off. The deck motion was too much. 14, 15 feet of deck motion in a 27 Charlie is just too much deck motion. And they particularly don't want the deck coming back up just as you're coming down. So they try to time it, the LSO tries to time it. If not, they'll just wave you off and you go around for another pass. The only problem with that is if you run short of fuel. Now, if you're off San Clemente, you just head back to Miramar and get more fuel. But out over in the Tonkin Gulf or the Sea of Japan, there's no place else to go, so you finally have to trap or jump out over the side, and that has happened a time or two. Anyway, Brown trapped right after I did, and I didn't get to see it. They taxied him forward to the island, turned him across, the deck made a big heave, his front main gear went over the side, and he hung up on the scupper drain with the 2 main gear just hanging over the side. And he stayed with the airplane. And they brought the cherry picker around. They sent me and another guy back to the beach. They brought the cherry picker around and put a bosun's harness and lowered it down there, and he climbed into the bosun harness and came back. That was on a Tuesday. He stood down, didn't fly on Wednesday. On Thursday, he flew again. The exact same thing happened again. Twice in 3 days. That time he didn't stay with it. He ejected. And the 00 seats in all of the airplanes at that point, we all had 00 seats. And he was back on the boat, in a matter of minutes. But he went to his skipper that night and turned his wings in. He said, "I don't want to go back out there." So. Yes. Okay. Well, I'm sorry about that. I wanted to show you. Some things that happen around an aircraft carrier. There's a wonderful scene. You might, if you guys were here during the period last May, I did show that F-8 Crusader that come in had been shot up in the right gear. The gear collapsed. The airplane goes down the flight deck. They're telling him to eject, eject, eject. And it shows the ejection sequence and shows you how quick a person can react and how quick that he gets out of that airplane. It's just a good set of pictures, and sometime I'll run them off and bring them by here and leave them here or something. But yes.
On your carrier landing, you call yourself a beam with a gear down, fuel, speed brake extended. Do you have that speed brake extended just to keep the engine spun up?
That's right. The question is why you have the speed brakes out when you're a beam. You want to have it be way up on the power. The jet engine, unlike a propeller engine, a reciprocating engine, very responsive. As soon as you get on the throttle, a jet engine does that little lag time to spool up, and that's why we ran them up at real high power. That's the standard way. Oh, you got it? Okay, good.
I'll move it, Tom.
Okay, then we'll do this real quick, Sue. Okay, here he is. That was his approach. You can see the wing down. Here's a nice, he's going to trap and pick up the 3-wire. And okay, 3-wire is what you're looking for. And here's don't go too fast, Barry. Here's the full arrestment. You can see how the airplane's wheeled down on the nose gear. And then he'll run on out. He's barely touched down and picked the cable up. He'll run on out in the next slide. This is an A4 going into the barrier. He couldn't trap, I don't know what the reason was, but this just shows it going into the barricade. They can rig that barricade in about 3 minutes. So it's very effective, and it traps the bird no matter what. Here's another one just showing an older A4 fully involved in the barricade. This is the arm, the outboard arm, and there's one on the inside by the island. And then they just, once they get it rigged, they just, they leave it there, trap it, unhook it, unwrap it. And generally when they come out of the barricade, they just take the black boxes out and drop them over the side. Okay, the next one. This is at F8. You can see that everything has collapsed. When the wheel broke, it broke the fuel line. And so you'll see a ball of fire under the airplane. Go to the next one, Barry. Now you can see the ball of fire here. This is all happening in a half a second. From that slide to this is about a half a second. The next one. And now he's going off the angled deck. And he's heard a lot of eject, eject, eject. He's heard that for sure. He's already reached down between his legs. You can see his head is back hard against the head cushion. He's reached down between his legs and pulled it. It's just about a 3-inch pull. He's pulled the ejection handle, and he's going out. Here you can see the canopy coming off. You can see how far we've only moved just a matter of feet here. The canopy's coming off, and go ahead to the next one. And the seat is coming out. You can see that he's gone up the rail. The canopy's halfway back. The next thing you'll see is the seat, the rocket motor in the seat begins to tilt him forward. There he's tilted well forward. And the next picture you'll see will be the drogue chute has gone out back up here, and the canopy fully deploys, and he swings, and on his first swing, his feet went into the water. So they plucked him out of the water. In fact, his only worry, he said, was he thought the carrier was too close to him. This is the A4. This is what it looks like when it goes over the side. You can see how the gear is hung up on the scupper drain. And this pilot didn't wait. This wasn't brown, but this is another time, and you can see the ejection seat, and you can actually see the exhaust coming off the rocket motor. This, I stuck this in. The Blue Angels flew this, flew the A4 in the 70s. This is just a low transition. Always liked that picture. And the next one, Barry. And then this was, I got invited, my wife and I got invited to a special cruise on the Constellation out of Seattle, and we went with our family, and so that was a lot of fun. I think that's the last picture, I think, isn't it, Barry? Yeah, that's it. So I'll be around for a while if you had special questions. I know we got one carrier guy here, or we had. Is there any other carrier guys? Good deal. But we're pretty rare in Idaho.
We can take a couple of questions. I know it's late, but he had so much to share. Does anybody want to ask a question right now? And then Tom said he'd stick around for a while. He's happy to have you come up and talk.
Go ahead.
I just wondered what some of those aircraft were that were on that.
Okay, in my era, the attack airplanes were the A4 Skyhawk, the F4, both McDonnell Douglas airplanes. Then you had the A6 Intruder. You had the Vigilante, the A5 Vigilante, which was a photo airplane on the big decks. On the little decks, the Photo Bird was an F8. The fighters were the F8s and the F4s. On the little decks, it was F8s.
I noticed that the wing would pivot up.
Yeah, on the F8, the wing, the reason the airplane flies all right, it's just the pilot, it's hard to see over the nose. So that's when they come in with the concept of putting the wing, running the wing back up on 2 hydraulic rams, and that dropped the nose down so the pilot would get a better visual when he's coming in.
Let me have everybody say thank you before you leave for being here. This is great to drive all the way over here. Thank you so much. I want to give you our coin of gratitude for your being here. And folks can stick around and talk with you all they want. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks for about that. Oh, no, thanks for